Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. Today, Daniel McAdams with us again. Good to see you, Daniel.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Oh, doing very well.
Good.
And guess what? We'll talk about Korea again. Today's a good day.
Yeah.
We have our ups and downs one day, what's going to happen. But this is a better day. Things look better. One person that might not be feeling real good would be Mike Pence. Remember his antics when he happened to get near and could have said hello to Un's sister, who seemed to be a delightful person. Yeah. And it looks like she might be winning the diplomatic battle as well, because now the South did send a delegation despite all the rhetoric going back and forth. And they returned, and it looks like it's upbeat. Even Trump said some good things, about it. He said, this is terrific, and, we need to talk, and we don't know what the conditions are, but at least his statement was very positive. So maybe the neocons aren't doing very well with the negotiations in Korea right now.
They won't back down, though. But yeah, the delegation went, and not only did it seem to go well, they're paving the way for a direct meeting between President Moon and President Kim, or Leader Kim of North Korea. So the two leaders getting together. But the surprise announcement from Kim Jong-un was that he would consider giving up their nuclear program under certain conditions. And so that's really the kind of the bombshell, because he'd said before he'd never do that.
And we don't know what to make of it. Hopefully he's sincere. It's possible it could be, even though we've on occasion made the point that that's the last thing he can hold in his hand. Even though he is incapable of being an aggressor, he might have that as a weapon to prevent his country from being attacked. But we don't know that, and if he's willing and if you take him at his word and see what happens. We've had deals like this that have been similar in the past, and I remember it clearly because it was the missiles, October missiles in Cuba at the time when I was drafted. And at that time, we didn't know it, but we had agreed to take the missiles out of Turkey, and that was a caveat for Khrushchev. And then they also had agreed that Kennedy made the agreement that the American government would not interfere and try to overthrow the Cuban government. The Castros were protected. And I've heard that statement over the decades. That, no, we've had this agreement. So it fascinates me that these people who are, at each other, and it's just a sort of a shake hand agreement, and it looks like that one stood up. We didn't go and orchestrate another invasion. We possibly, we would have the strength to do that, but it works. So now, if Un is offering this, I guess it's just because of the history of Cuba, it's a possibility. But right now, we don't know what the conditions will be like and what Trump might be asking for, because he is talking about the conditions. Most of the time, his conditions are, it sort of puts Trump in the box, because his condition was always give up your nuke, give up your nukes. And now they're saying they will. So now he has to say, well, no, we're not going to talk to you because we have to see what else we can get. And of course, yesterday we put on more sanctions, as if that's going to do any good, because of the history of the record coming out about Un's half-brother having been killed. And of course, our viewpoint on that, not ours in the studio, U.S.'s viewpoint on that is quite a bit different than the government of North Korea.
Yeah, that's true. So the agreement, this is from AP reporting on the summit. Apparently what Kim said is that North Korea is committed to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and has no reason to possess, this is not a quote, but this is essentially what came out of it, has no reason to possess nuclear weapons as long as military threats against the country are removed and security is guaranteed. So what does that mean? Most likely it means possibly a removal of the U.S. troops that are there, about 30,000 U.S. troops, and a cessation of the military exercises, which are very provocative. They're on the border with the North, and they practice invading the North. So people are speculating those are the two conditions under which they will possibly proceed to.
And it seems so reasonable. How can that hurt our security? How can that hurt our national defense? And how can giving that up will cause more chaos? Like Graham argues, if we don't do this, we want security and we want to be in charge. So that argument really doesn't hold because we don't need that. Matter of fact, our argument is it costs too much money and we're not safer for it. And we could give that up. It sounds to me like the people that it will most affect would be the Koreans, North and South. And South Koreans seem to be going along with that. And you wonder, too, whether maybe there's been a little bit of pressure coming from China. Even though we tell China what we're going to do and we're pretty tough on the China language. But maybe they were taking that point of view where they sent a message there, calm it down. And maybe that's one of the reasons why UN has changed his diplomatic attempts.
Well, it sort of puts the U.S. in the same position they're in Syria because the whole idea is we got to stay in Syria because we're fighting ISIS. Well, ISIS is defeated. Well, we got to stay. I don't know. We got to stay. The same thing with North Korea. We've got to stay because of this missile threat. Okay, well, we'll give up our missiles. Well, we got to stay because,
Right. Well, the one reason we have said, and many others have said, that we're there is we always have to have reasons to keep the military budget going. And this doesn't involve the $1 billion here and there. It's up into trillions of dollars that have been spent over all these years. And what has been achieved? Not very much. And as conditions continue to improve with Vietnam after we finally got out of there, it's ironic that actually a war vessel, I think it was a aircraft carrier, went into harbor in Vietnam. I don't like that, but I like the idea that it's not under hostilities, that we're going in there like we put up with all through the 60s.
And you already hear the chorus among the usual suspects. We can't do this because Kim can't be trusted, North Korea can't be trusted. But what they don't talk about very often is that the last time there was a deal, and this was under Kim's father, that he made with President Clinton, that deal was broken not by the North Koreans but by the U.S. because the U.S. never supplied. This is under President Bush, who took over from Clinton. He didn't honor the U.S. end of the deal, and that's where everything broke down. They never delivered what they promised. So maybe Kim can't be trusted, but the U.S. doesn't have a great track record either.
Yeah, I think you probably heard this quote, but I want to read it and get your reaction from it. And that was what Trump had to say at the what was it, where the reporters all get together and
press conference, yeah.
play game. But it is astounding because there might be more truth to it than anybody would want to admit. But Trump's making this joke, and I don't know how it went over, but I'm sure people laugh. He says, as far as the risk of dealing with a madman is concerned, talking about one, he says that's his problem, not mine. So maybe we have two people there. I keep thinking, I wonder if these guys are really poker players and they play poker all the time, and that's what they do in secret. Well, what are we going to do tomorrow? Yeah. And they play their games, and it seems like they play games at times, and yet they're so serious.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier on the sort of the ridiculousness of new sanctions on North Korea yesterday because the U.S. determined that the North Korean government used a chemical agent to kill Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother, as you point out, of the leader. This is kind of it's humorous, I guess, or hypocritical. He said, quote, the U.S. strongly condemns the use of chemical weapons to conduct an assassination, end quote. But drones are okay, and all of the other things that the U.S. has used to do assassinations, those are okay.
You know, we have this big debate going on tariffs, but I put sanctions in that category of interfering with trade, and yet we do that, and it's done always just by the presidents. The president edicts, whether they're tariffs at home or sanctions overseas, it's always something that they do. But I don't know. I don't know. I think the ball's in Trump's court. I think the North Koreans have the upper hand in the moral sense. Well, we're doing what you said. We did this. We're not testing any of our missiles. We're willing to give up this. And Trump has modified his language. So maybe the neocons eventually are going to get pretty upset. The big question is, how powerful are they? Sometimes we think, there's no way these neocons can get away with this. Look at all the failure in the Middle East, and the failures in Iraq and all this. yet they still come bouncing back and having influence. And we do know there's a lot of decisions made in this administration that reflect a neoconservative position, and his appointees can reflect this viewpoint too. So it's a mixed bag in trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen. And I think that's not a major revelation that it's hard to figure out what Trump is going to do. But I do think that they say he listens to his last advisor. Well, maybe he listens to public opinion too. Who knows? Because I think that he was, to win the election, he was perceptive and knew public opinion probably better than the pros.
Yeah.
And he picked out these certain groups. I mean, the way he treated evangelicals, the way he treated the trade issues and these sorts of things, and the positive attitude about military. So maybe he will listen to public opinion, and some days it sounds like he is, but I think we have to keep an eye on him.
Well, I ended yesterday's show with a silver lining. I'm afraid there's a bit of a dark cloud in today's ending, and that's that. The second part of our title, "Don't Tell the Neocons." John Bolton, who we both know, former U.S. ambassador to the UN, he met with Trump yesterday. So if he listens to the last person he talked to, we're in trouble. But here's the same John Bolton who wrote in the Wall Street Journal at the end of February, just a few days ago. He wrote in favor of a preemptive U.S. attack on North Korea. Said it's all legally justified, no problem, we got to do it. Here's what he said. This is really funny in a way. He's sick. He said, given the gaps in U.S. intelligence about North Korea, we should not wait until the very last minute. So contrast that with his same position on the Iraq War, which he pushed. He said, because we are sure of U.S. intelligence, we've got to attack. And now he's saying, because we are unsure of U.S. intelligence, we got to attack. So no matter what it is, we got to attack. So that worries me. I wish he would have shown Bolton the door before he opened it.
And even if you point out what the cost may well be in terms of life and limb and money, they say, like Graham, oh, it's worth it. It's worth it. And that's this argument. And that was the argument even going into Iraq. Well, yeah, there's some dangers. And when we heard, remember that quote from Albright, it's worth it. Yeah, it's going to cost a lot, but more cost on them than on us. But all you have to do is look at our veterans coming home and the problems that they're facing today, having come back from those wars. And we haven't changed the policy that had created that situation. So it's a big it's a big issue, especially when they say it's worth it because it's going to help us in national security.
Well, we hope that you will continue subscribing to our program, the Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Tell your friends to subscribe, watch our shows, share our shows, interact with us, comment on our shows. We certainly do read your comments, and thanks for tuning in.
Very good. And I want to thank our viewers very much for tuning in and the loyal supporters that we have. And this issue, we've been on it a lot, but it is one of the key issues, and I'm sure we'll be back on it another day and back on the Middle East and who knows where. There's problems may break out because we're in too many countries. We have military is estimated 150 countries, and we're involved. Our CIA's involved, and our military is involved. So it could be a problem almost any place. But on Korea, we've been involved there for 65 years, and when you add up all the costs of that, which is difficult, if you add up the military costs, it's hard to number exactly how many dollars, but nothing has been achieved. I mean, you can't even argue that there's peaceful conditions there. There's still threats. Our president threatens the North Korean president, and the South Koreans are trying to play diplomat and soften things because so much is at stake. But this isn't enough. 65 years of this. Why don't we say, hasn't worked all that well? There has to be a better way, and it can be found in some peaceful efforts rather than saying what we have to threaten. This is one of the things that he could turn out to be a very negative thing, because as we see this and see it in a positive way, I'm sure the president sees it quite differently. It's because I'm tough. I threaten them. They know. They're scared of me. I'm going to do this. I put on sanctions, and I'll bomb them if necessary. We've heard that for so long. that is not necessarily a success, because if that's the way you have to run the world, that'll lead to big trouble. And unfortunately, that policy is pretty well ingrained in the Republicans and the Democrat parties. So hopefully someday they will, both parties, they will accept the program of maybe having diplomacy. I used to sort of joke in the campaign that we have these thousands of diplomats. Why not use them once in a while? And we wouldn't even need as many. But generally speaking, we ignore the diplomats. And then there's these intimidations and threats and sanctions and the influence of the deep state and the people influence, especially in the military-industrial complex. They seem to have control. But we should keep pushing, because eventually it will end, because their system is not viable. The whole communist system wasn't viable. Our system is not viable, and there will be a conclusion. There will be an ending. We need to prepare for that and have something much better, because we sure have seen a lot of death and destruction, especially in the 20th century, but it's continued into the 21st century. But I don't think it's going to last throughout this century. I think the policies will change, and we want to make sure those changes are for the better. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.